Hi everyone, it's Raina. This video is for Scorpio Sun, Moon, Venus, and or Mars. If you have all of those, Lord have mercy. And it's 3 tips for attracting and keeping love. And this is a series that I've picked up that I had done earlier this year. This is 2019 when I'm recording it. And I had to do more topical material, but now I'm back to continue the series. And so, Scorpio, you probably already know this, but for just a general review, you are a fixed water sign. And you're ruled by 2 planets, Mars and Pluto. And anybody who knows about the planets themselves and what they represent knows that Mars and Pluto are not planets that you take lightly. They pack quite a punch. And because of this, there's a ferocity with Scorpio that is a quiet ferocity. For instance, the fire sign Aries is ruled by Mars alone. And if you've ever met an Aries sun sign, for instance, they are a force of nature. They're just like, you could call them a bull in the china closet, but they're also a very, just in general, energetic kind of an individual. And they energize those around them with that kind of like that raw passion. And when it comes to love, they tend to be very romantic, but in a kind of a bodice ripping sort of way. Whereas there's more of a smoldering thing going on with Scorpio because of the Pluto influence. Because Pluto is like the poker face that doesn't show its hand and is hiding, hiding feelings, hiding intentions, and, great for chess, great for poker, but with love, not so much, because it can create a power struggle with the other person that, I don't want to say that Scorpio doesn't realize. Maybe Scorpio is well aware that they are doing this, but the other party may have no idea that they are involved in a power struggle. They just think that it's frustrating that they can't get the Scorpio person to open up. So, the other thing about these recordings is that I want people to think about the fact that even if you attract somebody, maybe because you're good looking, maybe because you're in a situation where another person has regular access to you. Like nowadays, because of the way our society is structured, a lot of relationships seem to take place in other, or, people tend to meet each other in the workplace, or maybe it's even online. We don't have the same kind of social networking that we used to have back in the day, where people had a slower pace of life. They had more physical contact with other people because of computers. That has kind of isolated people. And that makes it very difficult for people to even come across one another. So I can totally understand if, I don't know the statistics, but if a lot of people are finding love through their occupation, that makes perfect sense to me. Of course, college too, I'm sure, because you have more leisure time than you do when you're older, and so that may be a good place as well. But for people who have already finished with school, it might be kind of tough. So, in any case, hey, if you have met somebody in a different sort of venue, please write it down below and let me know how people are meeting each other these days, because I am genuinely curious. So the point that I also wanted to make is that even if you do happen to meet somebody and you start to date them, it doesn't mean that the relationship is going to last. That's why I say meet and keep the relationship. But I'm not implying that you should just keep a relationship just to keep it because you're desperate or anything like that. But if you really want to have a long-term relationship, you have to realize when you're doing something that is going to be counterproductive to that. And that's why I was saying, a lot of people can attract a potential partner because they are attractive, they may be kind of personable, or if they're not like really that extroverted, they still have kind of some kind of charisma. But the thing is that if the person has been through a lot, they may be very skittish to actually open their heart to somebody new, because they've had their heart trampled on so many times before. So that's why I'm kind of wanting to do these. So the first tip I have, and this is just to even attract somebody, is to open up. I'm not only doing, I hope I mentioned that this is also for Scorpio rising. I said Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mars, but also the rising sign. And with Scorpio rising, this is particularly important because the rising sign is the first thing that you see. Just like your physical appearance is the first thing that people will see. Even before you open your mouth, your demeanor is what people see as well, or they sense. And, it's one thing, like for instance, let's say you're a Scorpio sun sign and you have Leo rising and you're the life of the party. It's one, or let's say something that's more obnoxious, an Aries rising, and no offense to anybody who has Aries rising, but something that might be in your face to other people and may not make a good impression. Even if, there's a saying that, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. People, it's amazing how many people will just immediately write somebody off based on one bad experience with them. And I personally wouldn't want to be in a relationship with a person like that because they may tend to be too reactionary and that kind of thing. But it still is worth noting that whatever your like the first impression that you make, you want to be able to even attract somebody. You don't want to repel them. So it's not even a question of, the problem is sometimes like if you're in a random place and you strike up a conversation with somebody and let's say it's a situation where you may never see them again. If you are arrogant or if you are dominating the conversation, obviously it's going to be the case where they may feel like, oh, this person's a narcissist, or, they don't care about me. They're just interested in hearing themselves talk. And they may just easily come to that conclusion. And meanwhile, you're very nervous. You're just like, you've got this, fire sign, rising sign that's very extroverted. And it's almost like a defense mechanism to keep you from appearing insecure, or to keep you, to keep your true self kind of like hidden so that you can still feel like you are in control of the situation. But you may be not really like that. It may be completely different than your true self, and you're scratching your head and saying, why can't they see that this isn't really the true me and I'm really different? And that's because people see what they see. And sometimes you may not get that opportunity. Sometimes you can. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there are cases where I have been too rash and I've seen, I've talked to somebody or I've had this impression of somebody and then I totally changed it. I tend not to be too judgmental because I know that when you don't really know a person, you can jump to all these conclusions based on the little that you see of them. So I don't really do that in general, but I do think that it's possible to for anybody to kind of make that mistake. So you want to be open if you're like, especially if your rising sign is Scorpio, or if you have the sun in Scorpio and your rising sign is Cancer, something very sensitive, or Pisces, where you're even Virgo, where you're reticent, you're a little bit unsure of yourself. I think of Scorpio as one of the most powerful signs overall. When I say powerful, I mean that I don't feel that Scorpios usually have a problem with self-esteem. I really honestly don't. They may have different things that mimic that, like, let's say an eating disorder. I'm saying an eating disorder because that's a form of self-control, but not something that I don't feel like Scorpios are weak-minded. I think a lot of times you tend to be very sure of yourself, but it doesn't mean that you're comfortable. Sometimes you may have instances where you don't like being the feeling that you might be exposed. So in those early stages, like if you're dating somebody, this is why I'm saying this. This is the whole point of dating in the first place, is that you go out and you share a meal and you start to talk about your life, and the other person is trying to discern whether or not the two of you are compatible in terms of your outlook on life, your interests, and your goals, your just all of that, your attitude, your emotional kind of state, the way that you communicate. Like if you have Mercury in Scorpio, you may be a man or woman of few words. You don't like to run your mouth a lot. And you might expect others to respect that and maybe even have a similar way of sparse communication. But this could make some signs very miserable. Anybody, even like if you're with a Cancer person, they've got Mercury in Gemini, they may feel like they're being tortured because they're with, and I shouldn't say, that I shouldn't use that word lightly, but they may take it personally because they may feel like you're deliberately being mum because you don't care about them. So this is one of the things that when you're dating, you're kind of seeing, okay, this person's like this, I'm like this, could we make it work? And it's that discovery phase. But the problem is, if you're in that early phase and you're kind of keeping your cards close to your vest, the other person isn't even going to be able to get to know you, let alone be able to just make that decision whether or not you're compatible. And here's the other thing too. When you don't let somebody into your life because you are being vulnerable, you're being more of an open book, the other person cannot have any kind of empathy for you ultimately. Maybe as a human being, but beyond that, because they don't know what you've been through. Maybe you've been, in a traumatic situation. I wouldn't be surprised if you have the sun, moon, or rising sign Scorpio, if you have had quite an intense life. And so opening up about those things, even though it's scary and ostensibly, yes, somebody can use those things against you and try to manipulate you. But if you have the guts to risk it, you could have somebody who has had a similar experience and they bond with you over these things. And that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for that emotional bonding. It can't happen if you're always kind of only giving out little superficial bits of yourself. And people know that, I think, at some level. They know that you're hiding something, and also that you're not accessible. So open up. The second thing is lighten up, okay? I just use the word intense. I try to avoid it as long as possible because it is pretty much a cliche by now. I vowed to break out my thesaurus to see if I can find another word for intense, but suffice it to say, if you have a major influence, an inner planet or point in Scorpio, you're going to tend to be a deep thinker and also somebody who gives off a very intense vibe. And some people enjoy that. They think it indicates gravitas or having a bit of heft to you. In other words, that you're not just superficial. You've got, that you're more legit because of it as a human being. But some people may find it uncomfortable. A Gemini person, a Libra person, all the air signs, Aquarius. They might feel that you're way too emotional, even if you're not emo in the classic sense where you're just like constantly emoting. You may be still silently emoting. Maybe you're brooding, and they may think it has kind of like a downer effect because some people do not want to dig deep in their life. They're kind of like skimming the surface of life, and they might see you as a buzzkill. And that's okay because you don't need to be with those kinds of people. You need to have a relationship, Scorpio, and I'm saying Scorpio even though it just might be your moon in Scorpio that you have here, but you need to be with somebody that you vibe with, not just that you are attracted to, but that you really vibe with at that kind of level, because you're someone who is a water sign and you are emotional, whether you show it or not. You are. And if you're with somebody where it's a little bit light and silly, and maybe you have, the moon in Gemini and the sun in Scorpio, and there's a part of you that enjoys lightening things up. Maybe you'd like that yourself. However, I think that ultimately you'll be longing for the type of relationship that there's always something to discover, there's always something profound to figure out, and it's not silly. It's not because you don't suffer fools gladly, and this is not anything about intellectual situations, but just in terms of people who seem to be very lacking in wisdom, who are not really intentional in life. They're kind of drifting. They may not really address life's issues. They just kind of like are on automatic. Those kinds of people, they might talk about a lot of trivial things. You can't stand making small talk. And so if you had to be in a relationship with somebody like that, that would be something that just wouldn't fly, I don't think, for a lot of you. So lighten up. Open up and then lighten up. And then in order to keep a relationship, detachment. And this includes the idea of ownership of others. Scorpio sometimes gets the reputation of being obsessive. And so, in other words, if the relationship breaks up and Scorpio didn't want the breakup, Scorpio may have a hard time letting go of that relationship, because part of it, I really do believe in a lot of these cases, is that your power was disrupted. The other person broke up with you, so something happened to you that was beyond your control. And for Scorpio, that's one of their worst nightmares. So being able to admit that you can't control everything is the first step to take, but also the sense that you have invested these feelings. So some people can, go from one relationship to the next and not miss a beat. Scorpio is not like that. Whether it's your sun, your moon, Venus, or Mars. Mars is kind of iffy, because that's going to be more of the way that you act. I would say more the Venus. You have, you're not capable of falling in love with anybody. Some people, I'll say like a Libra individual may be very, it's not that Libra is just totally not discerning about these things, but they may have a wider range of people that they are capable of falling in love with. With Scorpio, I think it's pretty special, and that you fall in love with things that maybe somebody else wouldn't, that you are attracted to things that perhaps somebody else wouldn't be attracted to. And I think that's true of all water signs, that you really tune into that other person. So you don't see people as expendable, that they're disposable once you're through with them. When you give your heart away, you give it all away. And so if somebody else decides to leave, it's not like you can just, okay, where's my heart? Okay, now on to the next. No, your heart is still connected to that person. And it's up to you to learn how to not get so caught up in that, because part of that too, especially with the obsessive nature and the kind of like a hard time letting go, comes from a place of, and even like if you're in a relationship with somebody, that overly suspicious nature can come back to haunt you, because you may be like trying to protect yourself from the eventual pain that you think you're going to feel by checking up on your partner too much, giving them the third degree. Where were you? How come when I called you, you didn't answer? It's so funny. I've realized that I do these things myself, not with that kind of mentality, but I realize, because I have the sun in the 8th house, that I'm like a Scorpio in that sense. And I can see how I kind of grill, give the third degree, like I'm, trying to, expose the real story behind it when there's nothing there. So paranoia, again, this is stemming from the fear of betrayal, the fear of abandonment, and understanding that we don't own other people. Even if somebody is having an affair, if you have the proof, or if you just know that you're very psychic and that you can just tell, rather than trying to browbeat that person, you can just simply leave that relationship. You don't have to try to force that person to conform with your wishes. And yet with the Scorpio energy, it's very relentless. And the Scorpio person may be of the mindset that this is my partner, and see it in a very possessive kind of a way, something similar to how Taurus does, Taurus being your opposite sign. However, I believe it's more on the level with Scorpio of trying to prevent themselves from being cheated on or abandoned, that those are the two main things that you may be trying to do. And in that process, you may overstep your boundary or somebody else's. You may be very invasive into somebody's personal space, feeling that you have the right to question them extensively. And meanwhile, that other person is, making plans to leave because they can't take that kind of negative, kind of like the negativity that's being directed towards them, as if they're guilty before being proven innocent. And so these are things that are not just quick fixes. They may require therapy in some cases because, depending on how severe the person was abused or abandoned in the past, that may be something that's hard to get over that hump unless you talk to a professional and really talk about, and modify your behavior. Hopefully they still do that kind of thing. I think they do in some cases, where they're actually helping people to change how they interact with others. You may choose a life coach if you're single and you just feel like you need a little bit of somebody standing in your corner and rooting for you and giving you tips on how you can meet, potential partners and how to act in those early encounters and things like that. But the point is that if you have found that you have been through certain patterns and you feel like you can't break through and that you just keep doing it, then you might want to try a different tactic, because obviously what you're doing isn't working, and every day that goes by is a day that you could be in a healthy relationship and that you could be really feeling like you're with somebody who gets you. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, Scorpio. But you're somebody who kind of stands above the pack because of your eagle eye, as I would call it, and your insights. And I think you have a lot to offer a potential partner. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and for anyone who is looking for a relationship reading or as a single person looking for love, I have love readings. I have natal chart interpretations as well. I have provided a link to one of my specials, but if you click on that link, it will also take you to my website in general. My website is rainamoonastrology.com. Take care. Bye.